Hi everyone, it's Jen from Mind's Eye, and today we're going to do a deep dive look in psychic medium reading on Frank Hamer and Maney Gault. So basically, all you need to know is that those two guys were so cantankerous as text strangers that you couldn't even get an in on them. And when you couldn't get an in, you couldn't even like send and are grim because they already knew it. And those guys were so heinous at the point of even Hamer could just like grin, and he already knew. He already knew that he was in trouble. He was in trouble because as soon as like certain habits happen, I already know it was just like go to prison. Just go to prison. Just sit there because you're probably safer at prison than it is out in the public. That's heinous in 2025. But basically, like you have to say, you have to like test yourself on mental health just on like that thought process. And that's actually where the public was actually going to about 2 to 5 years ago, where it was noted that a severe sharp mental health decline happened and you couldn't like gain or like get an in. And that's where we saw all these trip ups of kick ups to like outward heinous assault, just like up to the point of everything, where you could go up to a church steps to go to a service and somebody was just going to fly in and hit you. But really, it had something to do with trickery with these two. And these two, when you see the lantern and you see intellect and you see power, but you also see wolf, it was like an untamed venture of their minds. Like their IQ was so high, you couldn't understand it. So when you couldn't understand it, if they sit next to that criminal, those two officers when they were in 1920s with Bonnie and Clyde, that you couldn't really see it. And then you say, well, maybe they're grabbing at this because maybe they have this and maybe we should sympathize or empathize. But just letting you know that empathy is now a sin. So when we see it and you go, you can't even like have empathy on the way that played out in the public. That is the lantern. That was already seen around 1928. Now, the lantern really does mean this. It's guidance, instinct, trust. Like their instinct was so hard. They would just look at what they were eating, those two men, and just know exactly what was happening or how it was playing out. So the question, even for Abraham Lincoln's wife Mary, to her daily habit of what was she eating and drinking and how did her day play out, it went to, it was easy. It was really easy. What are they doing? So we have hedgehog. What else do we need to know in the beginning for this? Trickery, again, and love. So hedgehog, it really was like a type of new beginning for them. It was something that they weren't accustomed to as officers. It's hiding the heart. They're a little tender about this. They're saying in mediumship. They're really hard. What do we need to know about you two? It really hurt to have like a new beginning. It hurt like old ways of doing officers' work, as they say in their own words, couldn't get done whatsoever. But love, there's a lot of love. They loved it to the point where it went to they constantly had to have like an elixir, like homemade coffee syrup and medicine, and because they just like they had to do this new way of doing an in, of doing an in. Now they don't do ins anymore because of the HIV epidemic and the pandemic almost. That it's not encouraged, but really it is a free will choice to do an in. But when you say it, you have to say, I have to agree. I have to agree. It really is like a trip up. So, really, it's happened before. It literally makes you different on an end. It brings out your subconscious. But what do we need to know about that? About Frank and Haney. They keep saying Haney, Maney, Laney, Saney, do dee da do. It means like he was the grounding effect. Like so when people were going haywire, you couldn't say it. There was some sort of like quiet growth. So if they done an in, they had to actually be alone. Be alone. Wildflowers, moon, and justice. There was something of like untamed venture of the way that Bonnie and Clyde had grew this whole following of like Friar Tuck and Robin Hood and robbing the rich to feed the poor, of how they played it all out, where you couldn't get a done on anything, but it went to heinous rain, to point blank nasty. What they were doing that I could see was the way that they did their ends. It was like accordion style in. It was odd and paranormal to where it was like a freak show. Like, so if you listen to the radio, they're showing me they would listen to the radio and they would literally hear this like butterfly effect, as we know it has some people have gone through, or like a psyop, and their visions are so absurd, and then the criminal would be right there. So that is what was like highly guarded. Like this, what haunts you. So what would haunt them like in the 1800s, because that's when they were born, to the 1920s, like it was happening again. It was a type of loss. Then people, like they're showing like a community watch would come out. They had foreseen it. Knife, family. I feel like it was like a cutout in like a type of family. There was a story behind it. Hedgehog, dishonesty. Like this like it was like a tall tale fail, FALE, which means it was a false reading of hope. What you couldn't do was anything of like new of Sue of slew, which means you couldn't drink tea. Like those who were really good at like reading tea leaves or that type of divination, and it wasn't illegal and you weren't really considered a psychic because you could actually do mathematical measure off of it, you would drink tea and then you would actually see how it would play through just by like add the numbers up. So when we look at hedgehog and knife, intention, conflict resolution, to hiding the heart, tenderness. There was something about hiding the heart, hiding the heart. It was always in the dark, in the dark. So let's see what else you need to know. So they're literally leading me to something gentle, and it's a Starseed article. What do you need to know about these two men? It was a wild card. It was like rewards. It was like an opening of a door, like a portal. Just have to forgive, my dog is dreaming right now. Soul memories, gifts, you've done this before. There was like almost like this rebirth to where when you went to a speakeasy, all of a sudden you were with your soul family. And then when you went to it, you went to my will to thy will, microbrand in the universe. Absolutely. All of a sudden, like everyone was on the same page when they went to a speakeasy. And when they went to it, it went Orion energy, polarity, soul growth, conflict. It really rose up. So when you look at it and you say light body, crystal grid, transmission, activation, high attunements all of a sudden. Like they could see it and they could hear it and they could feel it because they were like feeding off everything. Excuse my dog. Gotta love the mailman. But basically, when you see spontaneous awakening, activation, integration time, you could be out like grocery shopping back then, and you could be at a speakeasy or somewhere, and all of a sudden you wake up or you're out and about, and you're like, I swear, I heard that. You couldn't even believe how hard it was to get it out. Lightworker, starseed, serve the world by being you. It was like the energy flowed through. So when I'm seeing starseed and I'm seeing crystal child, high vibrational individuals, they literally can hear sound so hard it becomes almost a neurodivergent. So when we look at it and you say defenselessness, righting past wrongs, and uprooting, it literally means that sometimes they moved out of the area because it was best to be known there and elsewhere being known. Isolation, physical connection, community. Sometimes some of them, they're showing me a little bit, they like to show me more in vision that it was best to be alone. So when you're actually watching the Highwayman, it was pretty accurate that, at some point they knocked on the door in their own way and say, we need you. But even though you're retired, and then you go in and you say, absolutely, you couldn't even see it coming. We know you're retired. But, and then all of a sudden it was. And here it is, like, you've got, foreclosure. You've got your lunchbox, but everything was okay. Pleiades energy, visionary, inspired thinking. It was already known it would get to the point of heinous action. Follow your intuition before it makes sense. You can't make it up. You can't make it up. Where does that actually play through? That chimed in really quick. It comes into the point of morals and ethics with how they're talking about how the FBI in the current date and time that's out in the news, did they follow through and did they adhere to constitutional law? Well, what do you need us to do? Morals and ethics? Or do you need us to follow constitutional law and rights? Because it's not always going to align perfectly. But when you do everything perfectly, you basically sit at home and you have your tea and you have your drink and everything is fine because you're not bothering anyone per se. And then you go to like the 1500s and they're incarcerated for eating porridge. That's all you needed to know. So that is what it was like. They're showing me back in that time where you couldn't get anything done, but they were correct. Like, Clyde was allowed to break out of jail on a work order, I hear dirt, and they would do something like that. You can't even see it coming whatsoever. 7 of spades to the Queen of spades to the Jack of diamonds to the 5 of hearts to the 7 of hearts. That's odd. That's an odd. So when you can't even, and it's always odd, it's a leave alone and let it alone and see what comes out of it, because you don't know what was a true or not. 7 of clubs to the Jack of hearts. Now it'll come out in what I'm seeing with those numbers and that pairing in a month of September, and by a September of a 29, you're not to know of a 1929 to a 2029 to the date of what was true. But it is like the seal deal on the table. Now, how does that relate to, Bonnie and Clyde, the Texas Rangers, Frank and Haney, that you can't even do? You can't even do. All right. They want me to do the animal spirit oracle. They're like playing moth can't be known. It cannot be known. Phoenix, it will rise up. Rise up. There's something about moth, and uh, it, it, it's disgusting. It's disgusting, and that's how they would play it through. And when they would play it through, you can't. You just can't. You can't believe it. So how does that be with like Bonnie and Clyde and the current date and time, where you can't even be it? You see these like numbers and symbols, and you see all these things and words and the way that's spelled, and you can't do a do on it. But it's against the law. When you see the owl, you go wisdom. What is wisdom? Wisdom, will, and wit. To the dragon, all-seeing eye. To the hummingbird, it really remits in right up to the window. Right up to the window and tells you every single day. When you sit there in nature, nature will tell you exactly what you need to do. And what was it? You need to actually go for it and through it. Because when you see fish, people get heinous. People get heinous over fish for some reason. Bonnie and Clyde did too. When they saw fish, you couldn't see it coming whatsoever. Where, let's see, they're really like nasty. We're trying to get it to the point of like simple plain language. If you saw fish and you saw how all the events of your life and your day goes out, fish is offensive. I'd have to say it was probably like something I saw on TikTok that has to do with GYN consult, right point blank. So when I see horse, I have to say it was a ride in and a ride along of how disgusting it really was on a point blank. So when you see rabbit and you hear it, it's like a toying. And then when you see this, you go Native American. This is where it's like symbolisms with animals. Whale, it really is like Norway. To dolphin, America. Wolf, like Antarctica, Canada. Buffalo, that's actually like Argentina. And deer, Appalachia. Octopus, Israel. Tiger, actually Asia. Straight out Asia. Earthworm, unbeknownst. Like a world unbeknownst. And when you see shark, they are a land lubber. A land lubber. A land lubber is someone who actually will be so hard on you that you can't do it. They really are the Navy. They really are someone who does like MP to JAG. They literally will catch it and go, nope, no movement whatsoever, because I heard it. When you see vulture, it was get it out of the community, get it out right now, and we can't even get in it because why? It's a free will choice, and that's how it is. So bringing it back to Bonnie and Clyde and with those Texas Rangers, those officers, on how it was playing out. It really was a deck of cards. It really was a drink. It really was boiling it down. When it actually went to the chase, how it is in the movies, they had enough. Like they couldn't get anything done. Like everywhere you turned, it was heinous. So as I see it play out in America, and especially out here in Connecticut, where we had 70 dogs passed away in one area, in one house, we've had 4 unexplained women found dead in a cemetery or in a park. We've had multiple of our officers, our canine, pass away. And then all of a sudden you say, there is something out in Connecticut going on. You can't make it up. So let's go to the runes. Bonnie and Clyde were so paranormal that you had to be dark and twisty yourself. like into ghost hunting and cryptids and study all of these hard, harsh things, that you were willing to get a sinus infection because the occult slammed you. So when you say wealth, gift, freeze, like at night, it like comes through havoc, and then like Barkana, birch, birth, heritage, and estate, you can't even understand that they would actually, they were so strong back then that they would put a hold freeze on people having families, the criminals. They would not allow any births. That's why we had the baby boom. So when we see Tewa, the warrior, and you actually see Eurus, you can't even believe it. You can't even believe it. When you actually go through it and you go, you can't even see, like, it's almost worth having a cigarette like we did in the 80s and 90s and sitting and thinking about it with a cup of tea outside and trying to like pick up on something. You can't even, it's not illegal to pick up on something. It really isn't. Fated, it's ill fate that goes to fate because it wasn't supposed to happen again. So when you see living and you see autopen, they actually are showing like the way everything was written around Bonnie and Clyde, that you actually have to stock up. So when I hear, the EBS is popping off and go get what you need, I'd have to say be realistic also, no more than 2 weeks. Now, they couldn't do that in the 20s because of botulism and the canning goods were ill. So that would go back into World War II as we are near the anniversary of D-Day. And it had to do with the World Health Organization because of dysentery so bad from the ghetto that they were crazy. They were so dehydrated. They were so sick that, when they went to the camps, and you're not to know exactly if it was a good thing going to the camps or it was a bad thing going to the camps because it was still unclear, that the trolling still happened to the point of ulcers, all like GI ulcers. When it was like ketchup. Even looking at ketchup is nasty. When you see this, Degas, it was like almost too solid of a day of a play out that you couldn't get it done. Now these guys, as I see this, you couldn't even see it whatsoever. Whatsoever. So I'm going to do a screen share here. There we go. So here they are. That's Frank Hamer and Maney. All I hear is Haney, 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 Haney. These two guys, when I look at them, like they already knew, they had been around this crime, around the Civil War. It was around cattle. It was around rattlesnakes. It was around corrals. It was around ranchers. And it was around a spider to spider webs to where they got a butterfly effect, which usually you get butterfly effect around cocaine and heroin. And when they actually do it, as what I had seen as a visiting nurse, that these individuals out in urban and other areas, that you couldn't even see it through whatsoever, that you couldn't get it done. That's how you know that there's around, like you start repeating yourself, even though if you're a clear, sound mind. But these guys literally, like, just sit and eat an apple, just be calm, like at this point in 2025, nobody is like able to get, like, out here we have clean slate, and then out here also too, it is funds to get relief, and then you always have the morals and ethics, or like what are they spending their money on. And that was the truth. But they're showing me with the illegal substances, it really was gold coins, and that gold coin would come out of like they called it a honky tonk. And when it came out of the honky tonk, that you couldn't actually see through anything. Like they were so good at a smoke to a hoke. A hoke is so illegal that actually they would actually make like a judicial sentencing at that bar and just go and do an execution because nothing was written. Nothing is written. That is why they're saying it. Like nothing is written. All right. So as we're looking at the picture, we're going to do the White Sage Tarot. Haney and Frank, what do we need to know out of this? Basically, loose sleep tea. All you need to know is that those individuals from New Orleans that are still on the run of a loose noose. You need to know noose. Ten of Swords to the Tower. It's not going to end well. It is not going to end well at all. When you see the Seven of Swords, it will not end well. Seven of Wands, you can't even believe how hard it was. When I see it and I go, you can't even do. You can't even do. You can't even believe how hard it was to get a Two of Swords. Like it really is a railroad. So here we are. Okay. So they're showing me railroad in agriculture and civil war. When you turn around and you actually look at the clocks and then everything, 11:44, 12:08, it really was a must be. And when you see it, delusional, you can't even believe it. Now out here, we still can't pinpoint exactly what is going on in Connecticut, nor down south right now, or anything that really like transpired with this auto pen and Elon Musk. High hidden motives. When we go back to Bonnie and Clyde and how it played out all the way through Arkansas, it stopped right there. And when you look at the natural artifact around that area, you go, holy cow, that guy escaped prison. I believe history is repeating itself a little bit. So when you go to Four of Pentacles and you go to the hardest point of all, to the Two of Wands, to the Five of Cups, there is securement. It's already foreseen. It's already known that you can't be it. What do? Just follow your intuition and your instinct at this point. You already know how to stay safe. Watch, listen, and hear it. Hear it. That's all you need to know. That's all you need to know. All right. So let's actually go to the Pleiadian Oracle with these two, and then we'll go back to the other screen. Universal knowledge, transmission, passion, energy work, mothership, light technology, and dolphin play. This has to do with another criminal in federal history, expansion of compassion about mental health disorder and issues and behavioral health. And it had to do with Ted Kaczynski. That these two are showing me that there was multiple like previews that these criminals would show, but you just couldn't see it coming whatsoever. And that whatever came through in two, you couldn't see it whatsoever. So what is true? Free will choice to last living wills. of a soul if they were going to do the crime or not. And that's all you need to know. That's all you need to know. That was how hard it was. So, where was the final decision with Bonnie and Clyde? Because they were riddled. All right, King of Swords and Temperance. It was such imbalance with law enforcement and legal and military and contracts and everything about paper as they knew it back then. They had to be like capped off. Like you have to actually get ahead of that criminal of where potentially they could be, no matter where they are, and go, nope, there's your block. There's your block. Is that illegal? No, not really. But that's what they're showing me. Is it realistic expectations in 2025? No, you're not to know. It's that hard because their mind is so profound at that point. You just don't know where the end is. So when you see it and you see the star and you see the King of Swords, I'm literally like everyone in the public at this point. Just like put an end to it. Three of Swords to the Knight of Wands to the King of Wands to the Two of Wands to the Wheel of Fortune. Bad luck. All it is bad luck, hidden motives and bad luck. Those individuals that I am seeing in the current date and time as it relates on how they did, they're profound, but they're stumped by an object. And that's why they're in prison. That's why they're in prison. They're highly profound. I can't get a handle on them. You don't know how old they are in soul and how long they've been doing criminal activity. That's why it's an enigma. So let's look at Bonnie and Clyde. When we look at Bonnie and Clyde, we'll do screen share again. Let's try to get a good one of Bonnie and Clyde here, a picture. Let's see here. There they are. Oh, Lord. They're a mess. That's what I can see. It's just like they were a mess. Bonnie walked with a limp. She was married, but she was not married to him. They were lovers, but they were not. They, I see gold, but I see cold like symptoms. She's showing in that picture she was willing to do that act, to him, but not on him or upon him. So she had the ability to see through. She could hear through, she could see through, she could be through, but she couldn't see through. That was one of her things. And when you see it, you go, man, that's odd. It's actually her optic nerve. It's actually her vision. It was so profound that she was paranormal, like Mothman, like a cryptid. And when you see Clyde right there, you actually see it to the point where you can't. Oh my gosh, just go make a sandwich and a cup of coffee, because by looking at him, you probably have 45 days worth of work as an officer. There we go. Those guys and like Texas Rangers, it ended up really, really bad. The things that they discovered that they're showing me in mediumship really comes from the point where they couldn't even see it through. Now, then they say, like, is this actually promoting? Well, you still have true crime. It's really not promoting anything. So when you look at it and you watch those shows, you say, what is true and what is cleaner? To the point of grace, to the point of line. Here it is. Oh, Lord. There we go. Not something to remember. Hidden motives and long pause. There was about 3 to 8 months where they couldn't get anything or any ends on Bonnie and Clyde or anything around them. They had gone town to town. They had done everything per policy, procedure, and protocol. They had been creative and thinking outside the box, and they still couldn't do it. So when you actually see it through, you actually have to be, realistic. Now, when we had this, and you actually go through, and that's how the conversations would start. It would start really hard, really, really hard. It was a selling oneself that was like honorable but dishonorable at the same time. And you had to go through. So you had to think about it in almost like a tank, in a think tank. Now, when we go to it and we go through it, you can't see it through to an ending. But let's look at the Akashic Tarot. What did these guys say where it was like, nope, D-O-N-E. It's a D-O-N-E. It really was a beaver. It was a beaver. It was so bizarre, bizarre of how they found that beaver, that deceased animal, that they went, nope, all done. All done. Master Artesian, diversity and reverse to the lightning bolt. So there was a storm. There was no storm that you could see. It was just rain. And when it rained, you couldn't even fall through. Archangel Michael. And then the northern, they're showing me northern lights. There was something in Arizona that actually kicks through where it tripped up a bunch of their affiliates that they were able, after seeing that deceased animal, those Texas Rangers, to finally find them where they would be. And it ended right there. But really, everything, like that energy of them was so hard that even thousands, even though high criminal they were, would still have to follow them like that in their funeral. And that's all you need to know. That's all you need to know. Those guys really went through the ringer afterwards, that they couldn't actually speak a whole lot because of what happened. So with that being said, that's really all I have to say. I know I end sharply, but with that being said, if there is any questions or concerns, leave a like, a comment, a share, an email. It's greatly appreciated. Subscribe to keep this going, and we'll talk to you soon.